We're really privileged today to have a wonderful guest. In the culture in which I now live, most of my life, which is in Israel, that we would refer to the personage who's coming here as Her Worship. And Her Worship is the mayor of Waltham, Massachusetts, which used to be my hometown for 4 years. And it's with great pleasure that I bring you Mayor Her Worship, Janet McCartney.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I just have a proclamation. City of Waltham, Massachusetts official proclamation. Be it hereby proclaimed that I, Janet McCarthy, Mayor of the City of Waltham, extend my congratulations and commendation to Brandeis University in recognition of the 10th anniversary of the Schusterman Center for Israeli Studies. I also extend the thanks to the university for all the work they do to the Waltham community and beyond, and best wishes for continued success in the future. Given this 25th day of March, 2018, City Hall, Waltham, Mass, with the great sale of the city. Thank you
so much.
There you go.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be back here for all the reasons that you might imagine. But unfortunately, the ambassador said something in his opening remarks that put me on the spot because, alas, I too sat in that chair over there. I did my undergraduate work here, but unlike the ambassador, I actually did reasonably well. But the reason I did reasonably well in that chair was because in organic chemistry, it didn't go that well. And I became a disappointment, certainly to my parents. I was supposed to become another kind of doctor. Sid, there you go. Well, and it's really thrilling to be back here, and particularly to be involved in the Troen lecture on contemporary Israel affairs. And there are several reasons for my satisfaction. First of all, Troen isn't giving the Troen lecture. Second, I'm grateful for the center's leadership, David Ellenson and Rachel Fish, who have, and other donors who are in this room, small and large, who have made this possible. And third, I'm particularly glad that their Summer Institute fellows are here, who are part of the larger community, and I know many of them participated in creating the lectureship. So thank you all. I also appreciate having the name Troen associated with Brandeis. The first Troen who came to Brandeis came about 60 years ago, was one of the pioneering students at this university, and because of him, my brother, I decided I would come here too, in part because I was so excited that he was living in a building called the Castle, and something that my son, who also came here and did his graduate degree here, my grandchildren will never see. So God knows what university they will attend. My role tonight is to introduce our second keynote speaker, Professor Rivka Carmi, the president of Ben-Gurion University, and to give the full name of the Negev. It's a special pleasure since I, too, am from BGU. And there's a long record of collaboration between Brandeis and Ben-Gurion University. Many members of the founding faculty of Ben-Gurion University, from chemistry through Judaic studies, were actually graduates of this institution. There's a great deal of academic collaboration, student exchanges, and so on that have taken place over the year. And something with which I'm intimately involved, there's a joint publication program where together Ben-Gurion and Brandeis produced the most important journal in the field of Israel studies, with more than 3,000 universities worldwide subscribing to it. Only in retrospect do lines seem linear and progressive and not logical. I never anticipated being here at this auditorium and at this particular station, even though I did pass my courses in humanities and in history. Coming here was unanticipated, but in retrospect makes sense. While I was a student here as an undergraduate, I spent my junior year in Israel and something this university made possible. And it was then that I vowed that I would someday go back to Israel. On the other hand, I never anticipated coming back to the old country. But that happened because at Ben-Gurion University, I discovered Israel studies. And indeed, it was at Ben-Gurion University that became the first university in the world to develop a program, a degree program in Israel studies, which we began offering in the 1990s. It was also through Ben-Gurion University that I became involved with the Ben-Gurion Research Center and Archives in Sde-Boker, which is something like a national presidential library. And it was that experience that made me a likely candidate when things began to become difficult on the campuses for Israel in this country. And indeed, I was asked to come to a number of places, but the place that I thought would be most logical would be Brandeis, because I knew by then that Brandeis was the most likely and the best single venue in the United States, or indeed outside of Israel, for launching a significant program in Israel studies. Not only did many of the faculty from here come there, not only was there much collaboration, but Brandeis did something really extraordinary, and it first did so in the area of Jewish studies. Not till 1925, with the founding of the Hebrew University, did any university in the world treat Jews as a living civilization. The study of Judaic studies really meant the studies of the writings created by long-dead Jews. The more long they were dead, the more interest there was in their writings, especially if they had the timbre of being something sacred. But to treat Jews as a living civilization began at the Hebrew University in 1925, and the first university outside of Israel that did so in this country was Brandeis. And if Brandeis would do that with contemporary Jewish history and Jews through the ages, how much the more so would it tend to be receptive to a place where the study of Israel, the single most important creation of modern history, and indeed, it began doing so, with it was mentioned previously by Ben Halpern, around 1960, the first time in this country anybody treated Israel as something beyond a figment of the ideological imagination, something to do with Zionism, rather than as a living society with all its complexities and problems. And it was from that beginning that came, Ben Halpern begat Yehuda Reinhartz begat Ken Stein and a few others, but it was still a small, but nevertheless an important tradition. And that tradition was possible to be nurtured of all the places that I knew of on this continent. It could be nurtured here because of the vitality, because of the reach, because of the connections, because of the commitment. I can remember on this campus, and maybe you can as well, I've met Ben-Gurion here, talking about, by the way, in his commencement address about the 21st century as being the century of China and India. Who would have known? And Golda Meir, Abba Eban, but not only the political leaders, but Amos Oz, Aaron Appelfeld. It was the arts, it was the culture, it was vital. The teachers in this campus, not only Ben Halpern, but people like Marie Serkin, were here to offer inspiring examples, opportunities for undergraduates to go abroad and not only learn Hebrew, but to return and with a firm conviction and a commitment to the Jewish state. Indeed, 1948 resonates not only with the state of Israel, but also with Brandeis University, which I'm sure our president and others mention from time to time. So all of this is important, and it's a kind of introduction to what I want to say about our speaker. Having this long association with Brandeis made me keenly aware of what a pioneering generation in a university does. I met Abe Sacker and the people of that generation. They were a little bit older than I, and I was just a whippersnapper, but there they were, and they infused this institution with a special spirit. I went to the University of Chicago, where my first graduate work was on the William Rainey Harper papers, the founding of that university. And that was part of the choice of coming to Ben-Gurion University. It is fun, it is exciting, it is challenging, it is aggravating to be part of the founding of a new institution. I was part of the founding generation of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Ben-Gurion, indeed as first dean, as it became a recognized institution, and I had a group of friends colleagues who were similarly driven by the notion that to plant a university in a desert was one way to make that desert bloom. And one of my colleagues, and perhaps the most brilliant of them all, was Rivka Carmi, who was a young professor in the medical faculty, and not long afterwards became the head of an important laboratory, and not long thereafter became a member of the important committees, and long after that became actually the president of the university. And it was she who was a pioneer in many areas. Universities, no one university in the world can do it all. There's no such thing as a generic university. Universities have to choose between a universe of wonderful questions and topics, that which they wish to emphasize. And what happened at Ben-Gurion was making that choice. Our speaker is a person who made wonderful choices. She became a world-famous medical geneticist because she took on the problems of a local population of the Bedouins. And Bedouins who engage in consanguinity and have other kinds of issues have terrible genetic problems. She became the leading scholar with a worldwide reputation for her work in that area. She became the first woman head of the Committee of Deans of medical deans of Israeli universities. She became not only the first woman president at Ben-Gurion University, but also the first woman head of VERA, which stands for the Committee of Heads of Israeli Universities. She broke the glass ceiling in many different ways, and she also did something terribly important. She made it possible for a whole group of other women to break glass ceilings, and in that way, too, was a pioneer. As president, she had to deal with a whole variety of choices and issues, and some of which I hope she's going to address today. How do you create a university so that it serves both a region, but through its service for that region, serves a worldwide community? Are local questions also universal questions? For example, Ben-Gurion University is important in solar energy. It's important in certain kinds of science and engineering. You can't do it all, but what do you decide to do becomes important. Israel studies to solar energy and so much in between. And I understand one of the new areas is cyber research, something that the United States could well, and the Democratic and Republican parties could well learn from Ben-Gurion University. In short, she asked the right questions. She had the leadership qualities to bring people together. And people together mean people not only in Israel and people from abroad in Israel, but she learned how to deal with some of the most vexing problems of Israeli society through the microcosm of the university. After all the conflicts, both between Israel and its neighbors and Israelis amongst themselves, are reflected in the everyday life and conversation and the politics of a university. How does one manage that? And some of that even happens here at Brandeis. And maybe we can learn from her on that basis. In short, as we were thinking about, or as actually David Ellison and Rachel Fish were thinking about what to do in creating this program, it was important to have a diplomat address us on Israel on its 70th anniversary. But it's also important to have someone reflect on the nature, the dynamics, the problems, the issues within Israeli society. And given the fact that universities are so important to Israeli society, what better choice could we make than choosing somebody who could represent the Israeli Academy? One last word about that, then I'll ask Professor Carmi to step up here. Israel is unique in that way. You know, that most Israeli universities have as chairman of its board diaspora Jews, not people, citizens of the country who pay taxes, though the diaspora Jews who become presidents pay in other ways. Nevertheless, the notion that a foreign citizen would head an Israeli university stems from an interesting history. Israeli universities were imagined long before there was a state. In 1902, it's Chaim Weizmann, Martin Buber, Bertold Feivel wrote a book, Die Jüdische Hochschule, which was a plan for Israeli education. There were only 50,000 Jews in the country. And yet they were imagining a national university system. And indeed, Israeli universities have always been spearheads on a frontier of one sort. They preceded the development of Haifa. They preceded the development of Beersheba. They preceded really the development of the country. And they've always been essential to the country. They've always been sensitive points of contact between the visions of those people who imagined a better state or a state at all and the realities that we faced. And it's really to address that kind of issue between vision and realities that we asked a pioneer of Israeli higher education, actually the first lady of Israeli higher education, to come to us. And the subject of her presentation is to be both personal and academic and professional. And she's the ideal person to share with us personal and national stories intertwine. Israel at 70. All yours.
Well, thank you so much, Ilan, for this generous and very kind introduction. Give me an opportunity to thank a few people here. So first to you, Ilan, for being such a wonderful partner for many years, not only an eminent scholar, but also somebody who you simply can trust whenever you need an idea, whenever you need support. And lately, with your relentless work, anti-BDS work, both in this country, in South Africa. So thank you very much for being there for me all the time. So thanks a lot. When David Ellison called me, not called me, wrote me, I had a long-term commitment to be in Singapore, to open an international conference in cybersecurity, which is a joint venture with Israel Defense. We are the only academic institution that teamed up with Israel Defense to work on cyber security conferences all over the world, really spread the word from Israel to the world. And Singapore is one of a very close community in that regard to Israel. Israel helped a lot Singapore in its defense forces long ago. And I was about to open the conference actually tomorrow morning. And not even that. Moreover, I have my daughter, who is a US citizen, lives in New York for now 20 years, visiting Israel as I'm speaking right now. So I had all the reasons why to turn down politely your invitation. Nevertheless, I decided to take it. You know, it took me a second to say yes. And not only because I have huge admiration for this institution. I think this is one of the most important institutions to the Jewish community worldwide. But even more than that, my great admiration to Lynn Schusterman for whatever she is doing, but for her role model on a very well-planned and very visionary kind of philanthropy, both in Israel and here, and bringing together the Jewish community in this country to Israel. Thank you so much, Lynn, on behalf of Israel, on behalf of the world community. So here I am, and I'm going to stick. Oh yeah, and I just wanted to say another word on our dear ambassador. I guess you once ambassador, you're ambassador forever, like a president, right? So we became really friends over there. But you know, Dan was a friend of everybody, all university presidents and you name it, because of a very, very unique kind of approach and I'll tell you, something I never told you, but I was so much impressed and very proud in certain circumstances, very sensitive, very uneasy when you stood, you know, usually against, you know, in the media, and the way you did it, and the way you choose words. I mean, I was so proud as an Israeli, as a Jewish person. You handled such a sensitive and really impossible situations in the Israel politics in the most wonderful way you could anticipate and expect of a great ambassador. So thank you very much for that as well. And now I'm going to stick to my notes with your permission, because as you may know, English is not my mother tongue. And I really want to convey the story that I meant to tell you tonight in the way that I wrote it originally. So I'll do what they do in Hebrew literature and in humanities in general. They just stand and read, you know. So this is going to be one of my very first speeches. We're going to read from the paper, but then later on we're going to have the conversation, which will be much more fun, I think. I'm not sure. So, my personal story. My mother and father immigrated to Israel in the early 30s. They were both in their late teens. My mother came from White Russia as a student to the agricultural school in Nahalal. Nahalal is a place where Moshe Dayan was born in. My father came from Germany as a Hachshara pioneer, Chalutz, after dropping out of university studies. They both came to Israel despite their parents' disapproval. And they both lost their families in the Holocaust. My father, his entire family, except from 4 cousins. My mother managed to bring a brother and a sister just before the war broke out, but she lost her parents and another 2 siblings. My parents met in Binyamina through their work. My mother was a social worker, and my father was managing a camp for Jewish immigrants that was at around 1945. I was born 3 months after the birth of the State of Israel. So I never disclosed my age. I said, you know, I was born with the country. My sister was born a year and a half after me, and we were named after our respective grandmothers. When I was 10, we had a festive event at my elementary school on the occasion of Israel's 10th anniversary. All the 10-year-old 5th grade students were convened in the schoolyard, and the principal made a speech of which I remember only one line. He said, "You are the children of the state, and the burden of its existence is on your shoulders." I tell you, I took his words literally. And from then on, I remember asking myself again and again, am I living to the mission? Am I doing the right thing in order to fulfill the legacy? Less than a year into my army service, in June of 1967, the 6 Days War broke out. While at the time of the Kadesh operation in 1956, I was a kid, in the 6 Days War, I was already a young adult. The war itself was too brief to have a real impact on my life, but afterwards, the national euphoria was very palpable. I remember the thrill of watching the Western Wall on the 1-year-old Israel single TV channel, of hearing again and again that war anthem, Jerusalem of Gold, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, by Naomi Shemer, the victory coins, the influx of tourists, the booming of economy with the oil coming out of the Sinai always. I remember beautiful vacations on the Sinai beaches. In the following 4 years, Israel experienced an unprecedented baby boom. I don't know whether you know that. We had just, years ago, a cohort of students at the university, the biggest cohort we had ever, and then it declined gradually. with hundreds new immigrants from Western countries, of whom, by the way, many returned to their home countries later on. They didn't stay. About 58% of the US immigrants came back, you know, the ones before, between 61 and 72, I think, went back to the US. And of course, the blooming Zionism in the former Soviet Union, with the 1970s immigration that significantly impacted Israel academia, research, and culture. Israel emerged from the 6 Days War as a regional preeminent military power. But at the same time, it also changed from a small country fighting for its existence into an occupying state, with the beginning of a major conflict with the Palestinians in the occupied, liberated territories dependent on one's political ideology. By the way, one historic fact that was never made public, nor was it conveyed directly to the neighboring Arab countries, is that the Israeli government made a resolution in June of 1967 to offer the return of most of the occupied land in exchange for a peace treaty. The offer was passed to the US and allegedly was rejected by both Syria and Egypt. Indeed, the aftermath of this war marked also the beginning of the ideological change in Israel's society, with the sharp demarcation of the right as leading the ideology of the Greater Israel and the left preaching land for peace. It also demarcated a shift of the Israeli Arab citizens towards Palestinian self-identification. The first 4 years of my medical studies at the Hebrew U in Jerusalem were intense but very fulfilling. Jerusalem was a big city with the eastern part open for cheap shopping of international goods that was hardly to be found in Israel before, for friendly dining even late at night. Everything seemed normal for a couple of happy years, and there even seemed a real chance for coexistence with Arab-Jewish groups meeting and forming friendships in Jerusalem. In fact, I had a good friend from East Jerusalem, Abed, whose uncle had a very fashionable shoe store. Whenever a new batch of Italian shoes came in, Abed used to come, take me to the East Jerusalem, and I had very beautiful discounted shoes given at the time. Throughout those years, I did reserve army duty every summer for 50 days as a captain, commanding a special officer course for women. I think I have one of my cadets at the time sitting here. Where are you? Yeah, I was just approached by her. So that actually left me with no summer vacations at medical school at all. But I was happy and content, feeling that I was fulfilling my duties as a child of the state. I got married a week before the Yom Kippur War. This war caught me on a Friday, one day into my honeymoon in Greece. We rushed back home. My husband, whose father was killed in the 1948 Independence War in the liberation battle of Savet, was drafted on Saturday, and I was drafted a few days later when the first missing in action soldiers were announced. I was part of a very small group of people charged with a mission to establish a new unit to locate soldiers missing in action. Until October 25th, the last day of the war, there were more than 400 declared missing soldiers, and the numbers were increasing on a daily basis. More than 300 were found in captivity, and the rest were gradually and for months afterwards discovered dead on the various battlefields. I was in active service for 5 months, the most horrible time of my life. meeting families, interviewing wounded soldiers in hospital, looking for evidence, searching first the Sinai Desert, and then I was relocated to the Golan Heights war zone when my closest cousin, the son of my uncle, who had become a father figure to me after I lost my own father at 14, was pronounced missing in action in Sinai. 3 months later, his body was found in the Sinai sand dunes, and the first time I broke down was at his funeral. With around 2,800 dead, close to 8,000 wounded, and about 300 captured, compared to 15 in the 6 Days War, the Yom Kippur War is still an open, bleeding wound in the history of the State of Israel. It was termed the earthquake, the oversight, Mechdal, and it was tracked back to the overconfidence, even hubris, of the 6 Days War and the prevailing conception that Israeli intelligence services would give the government at least 48 hours notice of an imminent war. This led to Golda Meir's decision not to order a preemptive attack, and thus to the surprise multi-front attack that, in a closed meeting on the second day of the war in the IDF General Headquarters, was called by Moshe Dayan the destruction of the Third Temple. The aftermath of this war was the big divide right-left, which further widened over the recurrent attempts to foster peace talks. Amidst the left euphoria over chances for peace, against fierce objections on the right, Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated in November of 1995, the second major trauma in the history of the state. I graduated from medical school in 1975. I was offered internship at Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem and at Beilinson Hospital in Tel Aviv. I didn't hesitate even a moment, and instead I chose Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. I felt that in the Negev, I would be able to contribute the most to my country. Remember, the child of the state. I was captured by David Ben-Gurion's vision that I carried from home, that in the Negev, will the genius of the people of Israel be tested. I was also attracted to the 2-year-old medical school that changed the paradigm in medical education, and also to the traditional tribal Bedouin community that fascinated me as a medical geneticist to be. I was board certified in pediatrics and neonatology and did my medical genetics fellowship at Harvard School of Medicine here in Boston for 3 years. Once again in my life, I was offered a prestigious position, this time at the Boston Children's Hospital. And I turned it down in order to go back home and build the Genetic Institute at Soroka University Medical Center and take the genetic research of the Bedouins to its next phase. There are close to 250,000 Bedouins in the Negev today. After the establishment of the State of Israel, this nomadic community gradually turned sedentary with all the medical and societal ailments associated with westernization of indigenous population. Due to an extremely high prevalence of consanguinity, mainly first cousin marriage, there is a very high prevalence of rare genetic diseases in this community, including diseases that my group has been the first in the entire world to identify. While during the first years we were mainly delineating these diseases and syndromes on the clinical level, in 1991, with the onset of the Human Genome Project, we moved to identify the genetic molecular basis of those diseases. We had a two-fold aim. One was to contribute to the medical world's understanding of specific diseases and through them of the molecular mechanisms of more common diseases. But the second aim was to provide the Bedouin community with the means to use our research results for the sake of preventing devastating diseases among newborns in a culturally appropriate and acceptable fashion. So in parallel to our laboratory bench work, we established community-based education programs aimed at various groups in the Bedouin community while training their own professionals to take part in the effort. Today, there are close to 40 genetic diseases for which there are prenatal tests based on the ongoing genetic research we had conducted at Ben-Gurion University. These tests would have never been developed in another place in the world, or for this matter even in Israel, if not for our research. In the last 2 decades, the prevalence of infant death, which is the death of infants within the first year of life, as a result of genetic diseases in the Bedouin community, dropped from 18 per thousand to 6 per thousand, very close to the 4 per thousand in the Jewish population. My close encounters with the Bedouin community exposed me to the harsh issue of education in that community, and especially among women. Lack of Bedouin professionals such as doctors, nurses, social workers, psychologists, teachers presented a huge problems, but only one of many. Together with a colleague, an Israeli Arab woman from the north of Israel, I helped establishing the first non-profit organization aimed at increasing accessibility to higher education for high school Bedouin girls. The programs created by this organization led to the increased enrollment of Bedouin women in higher education institutes in the Negev. From only a few Bedouin, really very few Bedouin women on campus, we have now over 350, presenting more than half of the Bedouin student body at Ben-Gurion University. Special affirmative action programs that were initiated over the years at the university brought about the building of a cadre of Bedouin professionals, doctors, nurses, social workers, trained at Ben-Gurion University and serving their own community. In 2000, I was elected to the position of the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences at Ben-Gurion University. The jewel in the crown of this faculty is the Joyce and Irving Goldman Medical School that by then had already gained international recognition for its unique curriculum and approach to medical education. Admission of students based on personal value system evaluation rather than on only scholastic achievements, as well as patient-centric rather than disease-oriented curriculum, changed the paradigm in medical education and gradually became a mainstream approach in medical schools worldwide. The Medical School for International Health, which celebrates its 20th anniversary this year, has taken this approach to the global level and is still the only medical school in the world that, in parallel to traditional MD curriculum, has one in intercultural global health, thus bringing the Be'er Sheva spirit, as it is termed by faculty, students, and alumni, from the Negev to the world. In late 2005, I was called to preside over Ben-Gurion University. This was the one position that I didn't fancy at all. I was planning to finish my tenure as the medical dean and go back to my clinical work and my research. It was once again the inner child of the state voice that convinced me that the mission of Ben-Gurion University, as mandated upon its creation in the late 60s, to spearhead the development of the Negev, which is two-thirds of Israel's landmass and less than 10% of the population, is actually sitting on my shoulders, as my teacher told me years and years ago. This is the 12th and last year of my tenure as Ben-Gurion University president, the most significant and meaningful time of my life. 12 years of enormous challenges, including 3 wars in 5 years in the South, alongside outstanding accomplishments of a young university in the geographic and societal periphery of Israel that has become a leading institution of higher education and a driving force for regional development. Ben-Gurion University was always known for its impact on the Negev, with much of that regional impact being actually exported worldwide. The Desert Studies International Campus at Sde Boker, with its water, solar energy, desert agriculture, Blaustein institutes, has graduates and collaborations all over the world, and very importantly, in developing countries. So too does the Ben-Gurion Institute for the Study of Israel and Zionism, located at Sde Boker, and that was headed at the time by Ilan Troen. But in my view, the current role of Ben-Gurion University is playing in the historical project of relocating the elite high-tech units of the IDF to the south is the ultimate fulfillment of the mission of Ben-Gurion University, which is above and beyond its traditional mandate as a research university, and that is truly unique in the world. The government decision for this move started to materialize soon after I took over in 2006 and led us to make a strategic decision to take a very active part on this monumental project. Our two major undertakings were the building of the Advanced Technology Park, together with Beersheba Municipality and a development company, and the building of the North Campus, which will double the size of Ben-Gurion University in anticipation of increasing numbers of students and faculty. The building of the high-tech park across the street from the university started some 5 years ago. Today, there are 3 complete buildings, and the 4th is in advanced planning, with over 2,000 employees of multinational companies such as Dell EMC, IBM, Lockheed Martin, Allscripts, that have established their research and development offices in the park. The number of BGU graduates remaining in the South increased more than 5-fold, and the ecosystem created in the park of academia and industry collaboration has become an international model that attracts visitors from all over the world: university officials, government representatives, high-tech industry experts, and entrepreneurs. The special theme of the park is cybersecurity technologies, research and development, encompassing a wide world of big data analysis and management, artificial intelligence, and the huge field of man-machine interface, robotics, autonomous vehicles, all connected things that face the ever and fast-growing needs for cybersecurity solutions. The involvement of faculty and students in research projects with the industry has resulted not only in numerous academic publications, but also, and to my mind, even more importantly, in startups that further employ graduates and make it attractive for them to stay in the Negev. The National Cyber Technologies Lab and the National Civil CERT, the Cyber Emergency Response Team, located in the park, have turned Beersheba into Israel's cyber capital. The impact on the South of these developments is already unprecedented and will definitely grow exponentially with the actual move of the IDF unit, first with the building of the IDF Technological Campus in our park at the beginning of next year, and then with the intelligence unit relocating later on to a site very close by. And there is definitely worldwide recognition of this regional endeavor. In 2015, a study done here at Brandeis University by your International Business School identified the 7 future global cities in the world. Among them was Beersheba, with most of the parameters evaluated being related directly or sometimes indirectly to the existence of the university with its strong high-tech and biotech. Another study published this year, just a couple of months ago, by Columbia University together with the New America Institute, entitled Cyber as a Growth Engine, analyzed 3 case studies of cyber initiatives in the world. One in the UK, one in San Antonio, Texas, and the third, our own co-system in Beersheba. Well, I could go on and on telling you stories about the role of Ben-Gurion University building the future of Israel in the Negev, economically, socially, welfare, health, and services. But let me just finish with David Ben-Gurion saying that unfulfilled visions are false visions. And I want to add my humble own, that visions not coupled with a sense of mission cannot be implemented. The incredible vision of creating a homeland for the Jewish people required a great deal of a sense of mission on behalf of many. I feel incredibly lucky and privileged as the child of the state to have been one of them. Thank you very much.
Well, does this work? Good. I suppose what approves is once a child, always a child.
Thank you.
But a child with idealism and with vision. But that's really my first question. That's really my first question. I watched the medical school grow. My neighbor was Don Ben-Or, who was the prime education pedagogue. It's not working? Who pressed the button? Okay. The question really has to do with how does one maintain that wonderful childhood innocence, the sense of inspiration, a commitment to vision, and the reality of vision in one's lives. You were part of that generation that created that medical school, where you were going to serve communities and not really prepare physicians who would hide behind white frocks in the patriarchal hierarchy, which was Israeli Central European medicine that really shaped the state. But one could take that through a whole variety of other areas within a university. And you described a university that attempts to serve people. And that's special. As you know, the language of the Israeli university is that we're the last Heidelberg in the world. And the freedom and the pretensions of the professoriate above everything else. You know that in Israel they have a rector, and the rector is called, by some, Rector Magnificus, which comes out of the medieval German university. How do you maintain that? You were a child of the state. You shared with us what you witnessed, the pain and the joy, and all of that went into shaping you. Can that be transmitted to the next generation? And if so, I'll ask you a simple question: how?
Well, I don't really know, but I need to tell you what I encounter throughout the years. First of all, let me just start by telling you an anecdote. You know, when the medical school was founded, actually it was a huge objection by all existing medical schools, as is the case always, you know. And they said, oh my God, you're not going to graduate doctors. They're going to be felchers. You know, felchers, you know, those semi-doctors in Russian. So I can tell you that the current 2 deans in Israel are coming from the first cohort of this felcher school. One in our medical school, and the other one is the Hebrew U Medical School, which is really a big deal, and a woman. So the question is how to maintain it. I think from some reason, and this is, you know, it really merits some kind of study. From some reason, this university attracts both faculty and I think also students that have this, you know, extra, commitment. I know, obviously not all of them, you know very well, that some of them still live in Tel Aviv and commute to Beersheba. But many of them come to Beersheba, although they could be accepted to any other medical school, either faculty, any university, either faculty or students. And they come to Beersheba because of the very special spirit. Not only the social experience, which is really unique in Israel for both students and faculty, but because of the special commitment of the university, which is far beyond the traditional research and teaching mandate of a regular or normative university. More than 50% of our students are engaged in community actions in a very significant way. Not just as a matter of doing some work, and that's it, very much involved in. And in fact, about 12 years ago, we inaugurated the building for community action, a very nice building where all the activities of community actions are concentrated with both students and faculty. And I had one faculty approaching me and said, Rivka, are we done with all the very important buildings in the university? Like we didn't have the physics building at the time, we didn't have this one. And I said, no, we still have a lot to do. But this community action building is one building which is like, it should be conceived as an integral part of the university. So there is a mathematics building, and there is a medical school building, and there is a community action building. I'm saying this just to illustrate the fact that there is a spatial spirit over there. And with the young generation, it is amazing. They say so many things about the young generation, how they are disconnected and how, they're like they're interested only interested in making money. And yeah, many of them are. But the ones I encounter, they're absolutely, dedicated, devoted, committed to Israel in general and to the Negev in particular. So, I'm for one very optimistic. I don't know whether it is Ben-Gurion University or whether, it is me that is a little bit not objective, but I really think that this is a very special community.
I think that ought to be appreciated by people at Brandeis. If you think about the 4 pillars, I don't remember all of them now, but I do remember the one that says social justice. And how do you create an institution which has on its banner the notion that we are committed to society and committed to making a better society and social justice? How that's done, I expect there's no recipe. But what you say, I think, resonates here at this institution. So from the optimistic, let's do some of the less elevating. You've spent a lot of time dealing with BDS. You live in a university where not everybody is committed to what it is that many of us are committed to. Some of the leaders of the movement for boycotting Israeli universities have actually come from down the hall in my faculty building. And as an academic leader, how does one negotiate between a commitment between academic freedom and the kind of openness and hopefulness that a university, a good university, would bring, and the reality that there are within one's midst those people who hold to very contrary views? It's not easy. Let me tell you an anecdote as a historian. I did not live it. But in 1940, just after the Second World War began, there was a huge crisis at the Hebrew University. The president of the university was an American, Judah Magnus. He left America in part because during the First World War, he was a pacifist. He was against all manner of struggle, and he remained that his whole life. But in 1940, when the state was under serious threat, even though there was notion of making the Carmel into another Masada, the professors at the Hebrew University decided that they would urge all their students to, in one way or another, mobilize for the coming battle, whether by joining the British Army, whether by joining the Haganah, but that they had a national responsibility to help defend the state. And what was fascinating about the Hebrew University in 1940 was that the president who was opposed to that somehow continued to live with the faculty who adamantly opposed him and his views. So dissonance in the Zionist project has been inbred since the very beginning. And dissonance found among people who come to universities, faculty, students, and maybe even board of trustees. How does one manage that kind of dissonance in such a society of ferment and antagonisms and conflicts and dilemmas and as Israel's society?
Well, this actually was one of the huge challenges that I encountered during those 12 years. First of all, to put the facts right. I mean, we don't have a group of supporters of BDS. We have one person, actually, one person. But one person that was vocal enough, you know, and put an article in the in LA Times that really started it all. And to this day, 10 years later, he's still being quoted again, and obviously he stained or colored the university in the so-called BDS colors. Yeah, we have a very active group, a very small group, by the way. You know, it is less than 10%. It's like 8% of the faculty. The same, you know, group that signs all the petitions, etc. And they are vocal, but they are all very committed and devoted to the state of Israel in their own way, okay? And I had a couple of encounters, very serious, very difficult ones. And I think I had a very precise vision on how to encounter it. You know, whenever it had to do with academics, you know, academic conferences, lectures, etc., then I thought it should be open, it should be free, because academic freedom really supersedes everything. But whenever it gets to something which is beyond academia, not related at all to academia, then we are a non-political organization. So, for example, there was a huge debate over what personally I was doing with breaching the silence, so Shovrim Shtika, when in 2 weeks there were 2 different issues. One, an academic conference talking about breaking the silence throughout the generations and in various aspects, philosophical, historical, etc. And at the end of the conference, there was a panel whereby there was various representatives, political, and also the breaching the silence people. And I was attacked right and left. Why did I let, you know, this panel to be in effect? And I said this was a panel within an academic conference, and this is part of academic freedom. Then a week later, I decided not to give a prize by the university to breaking the silence group. So one of the department, the university, made a decision to award a prize that we had in the university for 20 years for Arab-Jewish relations. They decided to give it to to breaking the silence group. And I said, no, this is a political stance. And in the first place, they shouldn't have been doing it because, you know, there was a university kind of an award. And again, I was attacked from the other side. How come, you know? So there was one donor of the university, right after I approved of the academical conference, he sent me a check of 100,000 shekels and he said, Kol hakavod, you did a wonderful job, And then he picked up the phone 2 weeks later and said, you know, if I wouldn't like you, I would ask you to send me back the check because it really disappointed me. So, you know, the very clear division, you know, divide between, you know, academic kind of conference and a political stand of a university is something which, to me, was very clear. The university is non-political, cannot be political, because there is a representation of everything there. Right, left, religious, non-religious, Jewish, Arabs. It cannot have a political stand on its own. So this is, you know, in a nutshell. I was called on an editorial in the Haaretz, the rhinoceros of the Negev. Karnafit, rhinoceros?
The rhinoceros.
Rhinoceros of the Negev, you know, for doing it. So I'm not getting the newspaper anymore. But you know, for me, at least for me, it was the point of, you know, being able to look at the mirror and say, you know, Rivka, you did the right thing. You did the thing that you believe in, the thing that you are supporting. You know, when I was the head of the of Vera, I was leading the appeal to the Supreme Court against pronouncing Ariel as a university. It was 2 months before that I was supporting Ariel University because it was boycotted by another university worldwide. So I said, boycott is boycott. You cannot, you know, you cannot really choose which one to boycott and which one not. But, you know, the decision about Ariel as a university should have been really dealt with in the Supreme Court, and, you know, we know all the results there. So you know, I think I'm doing the right things because I'm always being attacked by both right and left.
Lucky you have a thick skin. We have a few minutes left. Some questions from the audience. The light is in my face.
Yeah, I know.
And the hand closest to me is by this fellow, I think it's Ariel Roth. But the next one is the blue shirt sitting in the third row from the back and is waving at me. And then we'll see further.
Thank you. Thank you, Rivka. Your personal story is inspiring. I want to ask about women in higher education in Israel. The number of women pursuing undergraduate degrees is probably a majority of total students. In graduate school, the numbers decline, and the number of women being appointed to academic positions gets lower and lower as the academic rank increases. I was wondering if you could share with us some thoughts about what generates the obstacles to achieving better gender equality in Israeli higher ed, and any thoughts you have on ways of overcoming those obstacles within Israeli higher education.
Oh boy, that's a lecture in its own, a lecture of 3 hours.
You have 3 minutes.
I know. So first of all, I have to correct you. At least in Israel, it is 50% in both undergraduate and graduate, except for engineering, where you have a little bit less than that. And as you go up in the academic ladder, it's getting less and less, and most of the reasons really go back to the fact that women have to, you know, to balance career and family life, and even nowadays when you know, young families are very equal or seemingly equal, much of the work of the family is done by the woman first. Children, then parents, and it really it creates a huge many obstacles and a huge undertake for a woman to really go and achieve whatever can be achieved by a man. I was leading in Israel a committee by the Council of Higher Education to address this issue in Israel. And we came up with a very detailed program on, you know, how to tackle it, both technically but also in other ways. And I'm very happy to know that now there is a very strong commitment by the Council of Higher Education to this issue. Especially since, and there is a special also budget given to encourage women. First of all, to get into academia, because one of the obstacles is the fact that they cannot go for postdoctorate period in the States, mostly in the States, but out of Israel, because it is very hard for them to take the family, you know, and a husband, etc. But also, I always talk about the fact that there is not only a glass ceiling over there. A glass ceiling you can break, you know, with all kind of technical modalities that you put in place. There is also, by the way, they say that there is no glass ceiling, there is only a very thin layer of men. So, but I'm referring more to the what is being called the lead ceiling, very robust, this is the unconscious way of perceiving women compared to men. And this goes back to the way we are being socialized, all of us, boys and girls, men and women, beginning with, you know, pink and blue and, you know, toys for boys, toys for girls, you know, girls competing sports differently, without boys. And so there is this unconscious bias, and we see it in the university all through the way. Women being promoted in a different way than men. It is not a timely kind of promotion. They have to be much more, you know, ripe when they get their professorships, etc. So we are working very hard on that, both on the glass ceiling issue, and also on this very problematic, not conscious and unconscious bias that exists everywhere.
Well, I've been instructed that that is the last question, and I apologize, but perhaps afterwards. Rivka, what are we going to do? You've broken through the ceiling, or that other layer that I want to characterize myself personally. You provided an inspiring example of the child of the state and what could be accomplished. And your hope of what may still be accomplished is infectious. And it makes me think of the question that was asked of our first keynoter. You know, now that you're no longer ambassador, what are you going to do? And all I can say is that I know that whatever you do will be significant and have impact in the world in which we live. And I just wish you to go from chayil to chayil in all your endeavors. You're a joy to have here. It's a privilege to have been with you, and it's a privilege to be your colleague and friend. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilan. Thank you.